All right. Hi, guys. I'm going to pull Brian Festa on today. We're going to talk about today's hearing. Let me get Brian on here. Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. How are you?
Good. So, a big day happened here in Connecticut. Tell us everything we need to know. I wasn't able to get onto the call to hear the hearing, and I'm just so excited to have been able to grab your ear and hear this. And yeah.
Yeah, it was just absolutely an insane day because we had two of these hearings going on almost simultaneously, right? I know everyone wants to talk about the religious exemption hearing
Wait,
in
there were
Connecticut.
two today. That's right. I'm
Yes, I
sorry.
am. I am going to talk about the religious exemption hearing primarily, but I just want to give a
Okay.
quick shout out before we get started. Um, I want to give a quick shout out to the New York healthcare workers lawsuit, which was also a lawsuit that We the Patriots USA founded and was being heard before the Second Circuit, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And that was heard at 2 p.m. Attorney Cameron Atkinson was arguing for us in that hearing in New York City. And then a half an hour later, Attorney Norm Pattis and I were in the hearing for the religious exemption lawsuit. And that was in the United States District Court of Connecticut in New Haven. So it was insane to try to keep up with two hearings. I mean,
Wow.
I started listening to Cam. All right, so I
And
started
brilliant
listening to Cam.
attorneys, too, just to say that out
Right,
there. Yeah.
right. So I started listening, actually not to Cam, to the state of New York make their arguments and go back and forth. And I don't know if you've ever listened to a circuit court or a Supreme Court hearing oral argument, but what it is that there's a panel of judges and they interrupt you constantly as you're trying to make your argument, and they hammer you with questions. So that was one hearing. I didn't even get to fully finish listening to that. In fact, I have to go back tonight. Admittedly, I didn't listen to all of it because just as Cam was starting to get warmed up into his part of the hearing, I had to sign off and go because the judge was coming into the room. This was all virtually. This is the only good thing about it being
Crazy.
virtual. The
Yeah.
only good thing about it being virtual is I was able to sort of be in two places at once and observe both hearings. Um, the bad part about it being virtual is even though we're going on 2 years into this now, folks, they could not figure out the technical issues. There was a horrible echo on the Zoom call in the Connecticut hearing for the religious exemption for the first like 20 or 25 minutes. Every time somebody spoke, you could hear an echo.
Oh,
And
my God. That's awful.
finally someone figured out, one of the viewers in the audience figured out and put up on her screen, can the judge please mute herself, and figured out that that's what was causing it. So the judge saw that and muted herself, and
Wow.
then we could hear each other. So I wasn't doing any talking during the argument portion, but Norm finally was able to speak because he is such a great speaker in the courtroom. He does such great arguments, but
Hmm.
he wasn't really able to get going until they fixed that technical problem because he had to say like two words at a time and keep stopping because of the echo. It just kind of
Wow.
it disjointed everyone. It was happening to the state's attorney Darren Cunningham as well. But anyway, I thought Norm did a fantastic job. Arguing that he made some great points. I'm going to just give some of the highlights. Um, One of them is that he was comparing this, because they kept saying, well, Jacobson's still good law.
Yeah,
Jacobson's
yeah.
still good law. Jacobson versus Massachusetts, everybody knows that case by now. If anyone listening doesn't know, that's the case from 1905 about the smallpox outbreak in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they issued a mandate. The state had issued a mandate and the city of Cambridge to everyone in the city to be vaccinated and against smallpox. But Henning Jacobson objected. It was a personal liberty objection. He had had a bad reaction in the past, as had his son, so it was a medical issue more for him. He didn't argue religious liberty, importantly, which Norm Pattis pointed
Interesting.
out. He
Interesting.
pointed out that case has nothing to do with religious liberty, and that was decided prior to the incorporation doctrine, which was in the United States in the 1940s or thereabouts, it wasn't until then that the First Amendment and all of the Bill of Rights were decided to be incorporated to the states. Before, they thought they only applied to the courts had held them only to apply to the federal government. So it wasn't until later on that they were held to apply to the states. So since that's happened, we don't have any significant case law on the issue of religious exemptions and vaccinations.
Interesting.
Yes, not at the Supreme Court anyway. So anyway, Norm brought up the point that yes, okay, Jacobson is still good law. That's true. But so is Buck v. Bell. And for those of you who don't know Buck v. Bell, that Justice Holmes very famously stated that 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. That was the forced sterilization case, if you don't know it. That's still good law,
Wow.
folks. That is still good law.
Wow.
And he brought that up. And
Wow.
said, okay, so you're pulling a quote, because they pulled a quote out of Jacobson about religious liberty, or not about religious liberty, about liberty interest, not having, doesn't override, public health concerns. And they're saying, okay, well, I can pull out quotes too from decisions that are still good law, like Buck v. Bell, and nobody would argue that is something, the world has changed. We're not in that world anymore. And I just thought it was such a great point. And the judge was a little taken aback for a moment. She was at first like, well, come on, nobody would seriously argue that nobody would seriously make an argument in defense of Buck v. Bell. By the way,
That's
I
so
think that,
interesting.
I think that's where we're headed, folks.
Wow.
By the way, I think
Yeah.
people will be making an argument, but anyway, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But he said, "Oh
Fascinating,
no."
though.
Yeah, he said. Norm said, "Okay, no, of course not. You'd have to be out of your mind to make that argument." But that's my point. Just because a case is still good law doesn't mean we should constantly be bringing it up and holding it up as our gold standard. And actually, he didn't say this, I don't think, in the hearing, but the interesting thing about the history of Buck v. Bell, if you read that decision, they actually relied on the Jacobson decision. The court relied on Jacobson in Buck v. Bell, so they used that to justify forced sterilization. So Jacobson's a horrible decision, and what Norm did say is what he was positing is that Jacobson is just as horrible of a decision as Buck v. Bell, and that's why it should not be held to still be adhered to, even though it's still good law. It hasn't been overruled. So here's the thing. So that was great. I mean, at one point he was quoting Sophocles, Antigone, and Sophocles. He was. What was another quote? He was saying, listen, there's some inherent risk just going out of the house. We're not going to solve every public health risk. And he said, so to say that these kids are such a threat, just because they're unvaccinated is just ridiculous. Life has risk. What did he say? He said, the business. What did he say? I wrote it down.
This is great.
I want to say exactly what his quote was. It was really, really good. It was. I mean, Norm does such a great job. That's why we're so lucky to have him. But he said, here we go. All right.
Now, can we see any? This isn't recorded. Like, could we go and I would just love to see this argument and him presenting it. You can't. There's no recording of it, correct?
No, unfortunately, there's not a recording that I'm aware of at the district court level. There is. Yeah, he said. So there is a recording for the Second Circuit hearing we had for the New York healthcare workers today, but there's no recording because this was just on a Zoom call. But this is what he said. He said, obviously just going out into public carries inherent risks. No one gets out of the business of living alive.
Wow.
And that's the whole point. I mean, none of us is going to be free from risk or free from death. I mean, that's just part of living, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to accept that. And these people that would have us believe that the government can protect us from all harm and can protect us from dying, it's just foolishness. It's utter foolishness. Yep. And he exposed that very clearly in open court today. It was a great, great, great argument, I thought. I'm not going to speculate as to what the decision will be. I have my own thoughts on what I think that will be, but I don't want to say that because I don't think it's appropriate, and the decision will be forthcoming. And it doesn't really matter what I think anyway, because what matters is what the decision will actually be. And that will be forthcoming shortly. I would expect that fairly shortly. So what this decision is not a decision. in the whole case yet. This is a decision on the motion to dismiss, just like we saw in the mask lawsuit last year, right?
Yeah.
First, the state files a
Yep,
motion to
yep.
dismiss, and you have a hearing just on that before you can get to the merits of the actual case. That's the same thing that's going on here. This is a hearing just on the motion to dismiss, and then if we fail, our case will go on and be heard in the court. If not, if we're denied and the motion to dismiss is granted, then we will have to appeal to the Second Circuit, the same court we were at today, arguing for religious liberty in defense of New York healthcare workers, which actually could have a bearing on this case as well.
Wow,
because Cameron was making an argument. I have to go back and listen to it, but he was telling me on the phone today, because I spoke to him after the argument. He called me, that he was making an argument in court that this, basically against any kind of rule that would eliminate religious exemptions anywhere. And this is the Second Circuit, which includes Connecticut. So that the state, he was making an argument that the state doesn't have the power to take away religious exemptions, period, whether for employment, whether for school. I mean, the state doesn't have that power. That's not part of their police power to say, to override the Constitution, override the First Amendment. So if that's the case, and we actually got a ruling favorably in that regard, it might have to be at the Supreme Court to get it. But we're only a breath away from the Supreme Court in that case. We're very close to the Supreme Court in that case. If we get the Supreme Court to take that case up and we get a ruling like that, that could have applicability to this case even, and to our chances of getting an injunction, in Connecticut. Now, most people, you say, well, why would you need an injunction? Most people are safe in Connecticut. Most people were grandfathered, but not everyone. Remember, it was only K through 12 students who already had a religious exemption on file.
Yeah.
Okay, as of the date of signing or before it was signed.
Yeah.
The State Department of Ed interpreted that to be 11:59 p.m. on April 27th, even though it wasn't signed until April 28th. I kind of disagree. I disagree with that from a legal standpoint, because until the moment it was signed, I don't care if it was 9 a.m. on April 28th. To me, that should still count. I don't think it was signed till like noon. So to me, that should, or maybe it was 11. So to me, that should still count. But anyway, here's the thing, though. Yes. What about all the preschoolers that couldn't start kindergarten this year? Yeah. There is truly an emergency for them. They're being denied their education. What about all the people that transferred in from out of state? Believe it or not, some people did move to Connecticut this past year.
They did.
It wasn't a huge number. There were probably almost definitely more leaving than coming in. But still, people did move. People did move here for whatever reason, and they should be allowed to have exemptions too. So this is going to be very, very interesting to see how it plays out. These two decisions may be coming out right around the same time. I think we'll get a decision from the Second Circuit sooner. They're pretty quick on these decisions, and this is
really exciting, because if the case that we were just talking about with the Second Circuit, which is in New York, guys. So if you're just tuning in, because I put just the religious exemption, I wasn't thinking about there's so much activity going on, but so if there's a win here on the Second Circuit, that'll have an effect upon Connecticut, correct? Because we would have more legal standing, but it would still have to go through the court process. So that would be argued in court, which would probably give us more of a win. Like with this case simultaneously happening. So if there's a ruling in favor of that, how does this affect the case happening right now that happened today? Of course, we don't know whether it's going to proceed or dismiss, but you can appeal that too. So I'm sure no matter what happens, nothing's over.
Right. Nothing's over. There will be an appeal. So if we lose the religious exemption lawsuit hearing today, which would basically mean their motion to dismiss, the state's motion to dismiss, as well as the motions filed by the local school boards, if that's granted, then we would have our case dismissed and we would have to appeal to the Second Circuit. That could very well happen. We said from the beginning, we expect that we're going to have to appeal this all the way up to the Supreme Court. We do not expect to just win this right away and then have nobody appeal. The
Pray big, guys. Pray big.
Yeah, the state's not going to back down. Even if we win the ultimate lawsuit, let's say we win on the motion to dismiss, the lawsuit goes forward, and we get a favorable decision in our favor at the U.S. District Court, we still are going to have to argue it on appeal, because the state's going to appeal it. They're not just going to accept that decision. They have the right to appeal too. So this is going up to the Second Circuit and is going to be petitioned for cert probably at some point. certiorari, which is the review by the Supreme Court. They call it cert. So at some point, you're going to have that petition for cert filed at the United States Supreme Court. I don't know whether they'll definitely take it up, but at some point, we're going to ask the Supreme Court to review it, or the state is, and this will be heard. At least at the Second Circuit, hopefully at the Supreme Court. I hope it does go all the way to the Supreme Court. I actually would not be happy and fully satisfied with this decision if we just won at the district court and the state went home and nobody appealed and we just won in Connecticut, because then we only save Connecticut.
Yeah.
If we win at the Second Circuit, we save Connecticut, New York, and Vermont. Those are the states in the Second Circuit. If we win at the Supreme Court, we save every state in the United States that the religious exemption can never be taken away, and every state that lost it would have it reinstated. So that's what I want to happen. That's why I want this to go to the Supreme Court. That's why I don't want just to win it in Connecticut and have everybody go home, because I'm worried about the children in New York and in Maine and in California and soon to be, Massachusetts and West Virginia and Mississippi that have never had one. They would have to have one. If we won this, they've never had a religious exemption. They would need to have a religious exemption in every single state, even the states that never had one to begin with, which is West Virginia and Mississippi. So in California, that's been out of one since 2015, would get it back. So it would be huge, and this is why we are going to fight very hard to get it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So if we lose at the district level, that's not reason to start crying. I mean, we're expecting to have to go all the way up to the top. Anyway, this is just on the motion to dismiss, though. If this got to the Supreme Court, they would not be hearing, like at this point, if this particular decision went up, it would just be on the motion to dismiss. The Supreme Court would send it back to have the whole thing decided before then we would, probably have to appeal back up there. But so this is the threshold jurisdictional issue. So you're always allowed to, what you do first as a threshold matter is you always file the motion to dismiss, as the first thing you do when someone files a lawsuit against you. So that's why the state did that. Yeah. Because obviously you want to get it tossed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although you can raise jurisdiction at any time, but as an issue, you want to do it earlier on because you don't want your clients to have to go through the trial, right? You'd rather just have it. You'd rather just have it thrown out of court. Right. So, and when you're talking about clients that have to pay a lot of money, I mean, the state has the attorneys on as part of on the payroll. But if you're talking about like the boards of education, Glastonbury, Stamford, were there. These Bethel, those are the three boards of education that were also defendants. They had their attorneys there, and they're getting paid by the district or their insurance carrier. But regardless, the district has to pay out money for those attorneys. So they want it dismissed as quickly as possible. So it makes sense. But we're fighting it, and we want this heard all the way. We promised we would do this. We told them at the public hearing, remember, before the Public Health Committee, we will be filing a lawsuit. We told them we told all the legislators we met with, this is going to end up in court. The legislators themselves said there's going to be lawsuits, said right on the House and Senate floor, this is going to open up, a slew of litigation. And we kept our promise. Oops, my camera fell.
We lost you for a second.
No, listen, I'm sorry about that.
That's
kept
okay.
our promise. I was getting a little too, emphatic there, hitting my desk, and the camera fell off. But we kept our promise, folks. We said that we were going to do this. We said that we wouldn't back down. We were going to stand up in defense of the children, in defense of religious freedom in this state, in defense of the Constitution of the United States and of Connecticut. And we're doing it. And we're going to see it through all the way through. We really, really appreciate all the support from people. The religious exemption lawsuit is fully funded, but we have a lot of other legal battles, including, like, for instance, we mentioned the New York healthcare workers lawsuit. We have many other lawsuits against these COVID mandates. So we really, really appreciate any support people can give to our organization. Primarily, I'm mentioning We the Patriots USA is the lead plaintiff in both of these lawsuits. That's the organization, our nonprofit organization, that's heading up most of the litigation. Although Connecticut Freedom Alliance is also a plaintiff, a named plaintiff in the religious exemption lawsuit.
Wow. So that's great. So folks can go visit wethepatriotsusa.org. I
You,
should have typed that into
yes,
did I still have that? Okay.
wethepatriotsusa.org. Check out all the stuff we're doing, and if you can make a donation and share it with people, we'd greatly appreciate that. Because, like I said, even though this particular lawsuit is funded, we have a lot of other legal efforts and a lot of other organizational needs to keep our organization going. We're growing really, really fast, but we're growing too fast. Our funds haven't kept up with our growth because of the need right now with all these COVID shot mandates, all of these people losing their jobs, getting kicked out of college, losing their livelihoods, not being able to support their families. We're fielding calls from coast to coast on this right now. And it's overwhelming. And we don't have a staff to handle all of it. That's another thing we need donations for. I mean, we need to grow this into a much larger operation and a true litigation machine to be a bulwark against tyranny.
Absolutely. And somebody was asking if donations were still being taken. And I said, yeah, I hope I put the correct link in there. wethepatriots.org. Let me pull that up so you can see that.
But I want to make it clear, not for the religious exemption lawsuit. That is fully funded. I don't want people thinking that their money is going there, because that's already funded. But if they want to support the organization, all the great work that we're doing, like I said, against COVID mandates, listen, if they mandate this for children, we will be filing litigation for that too, against that. We fully intend to anyway, if we can get the funds. But so there's a lot more on the horizon. We can't wait until something happens to get the funding. We need to have the funding already ready to go. So the religious exemption lawsuit, we don't need donations for that, but we need donations for the organization in general, because we have so much other litigation we want to file.
You guys are busy.
We're so busy. We filed a case.
There's lots of cool stuff that you're doing. There's so much. Just give me
there's more. Yeah, there's more. I'm excited
rundown.
to.
This
all
is
right,
great,
so
Brian.
we're representing Jody O'Malley, who's the Project Veritas whistleblower who went into the hospital undercover.
That's great. That's great.
She contacted us. She's in Arizona, and she got placed on administrative leave after that Project Veritas video came out. She's the one that went undercover in the hospital, and the doctor was
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep. So I've talked to Jody. She's become a friend of mine, and we are representing her, or our attorneys that we retained have represented her, and we paid for all of her pre-litigation expenses. So hopefully it doesn't have to go to court, but everything leading up to try to keep her out of court, we paid for that in full. The Arizona State Nursing Board is also investigating her, so we have to defend her against the nursing board. And then we also are filing a lawsuit against Walmart, because a U.S. Marine in Minnesota, this is what happened. He was told, we just announced this about a little over a week ago, he got a script for ivermectin when he was sick with COVID. He and his wife both got scripts. And the Walmart pharmacist told him, no, we won't fill it, which we know is happening all over the country. Well, we're finally going to hold this pharmacist, the pharmacy, and Walmart accountable, because we do not believe that a pharmacist has any right to be engaging in the unauthorized practice of medicine, which is what that was. When you're stepping in between a doctor and their patient and saying, no, I don't think you should be giving him that medication, you're now playing doctor and practicing medicine without a license. All right. So we are filing a lawsuit against Walmart. That is also fully funded. Great thanks to my friend Steve Dace on Blaze TV. I went on his show, and his listeners got behind us, and we fully funded that lawsuit. But again, now I'm being contacted by people who got denied ivermectin at Walgreens, at CVS, at all these other places across the United States, and we'd like to file litigation against those companies too. So this is why there's a continuous need for funding, because it's not just one lawsuit.
Yeah.
There's always a string of lawsuits waiting to be filed down the line, and they're all going to require funding. So I don't want people just to be short-sighted and think, okay, we've got this religious exemption lawsuit fully funded. They don't need to do anything else. They can just focus on that and go home. No, we have so much else to do, and it is going to affect you. If we win that lawsuit against Walmart, that could affect pharmacists all over the country, and they would have to fill, if we get a decision, we go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Awesome.
They would have to fill prescriptions like that, even if they don't agree with it. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, whatever it is, they would have to fill it if the doctor prescribes it. So that's what we're trying to set a precedent for. This is so much larger than any one state or any one lawsuit. I just want people to know that.
Yeah, no, that's great. These are wonderful things to hear. It's exciting. I think people's spirits are low. I interviewed a woman today. We're doing a series of vaccine injuries, the COVID vaccine, and it's just heartbreaking. And there's a lot on the line right now. And this woman was coerced into it. She didn't want to. She cried. She cried while they did this to her, and her supervisor was holding her hand. And when she was injured, they haven't she doesn't get any workman's comp. She's not getting anything, of course, from the pharmaceutical company that produced the shot. Yeah.
She should be filing. If I were her, I'd be filing for workers' comp. I mean, I don't know all the details. This is not legal advice, but I would absolutely, if I were injured due to a workplace mandate, that should be covered under the workers' compensation statute.
All right, I'll say something to her to investigate that further, because she's left with medical bills. She has to go outside of the system. You know, it's this classic story that both you and I know very, very well on the journey with these injuries and what happens, and with people being coerced into it via, if it's like school for your child. These are very serious things. And so we do have three branches of government for a reason. And I hope that we can change this in the courts. And I know some people will get upset and say, the courts are this or that, and there's nowhere else to go. I want to hold out hope for stuff. I just wanted to move into a question about, the frustration's high, the risks are high. So what is it with phone etiquette? I heard that there was some phone chatter during the recesses. There was a lot of chatter. I knew we were
forgetting to talk about something.
And I think we should discuss that, because I'm seeing a lot of stuff online about that, and I want to have just a discussion about because this happened in New York, by the way. I was on that call, and it happened in New York, and I was like, oh,
I was as well. I was on that, and they had to stop it.
Yeah, exactly. So it got shut down. So what is your advice for parents who are justifiably frustrated, but being on a Zoom call, which is new to, or not a Zoom call, but a hearing call, is new to everybody. What can you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely remain calm and quiet. There is no call for, getting irate and shouting and swearing. I mean,
oh, Brian, I lost you. Oh no. I hope he comes back. Brian! Oh, something happened. Uh-oh, let me see, guys, if I could get him back. He's totally frozen. Give me a quick second. I'm going to put this screen. Let me see. I lost you for a minute. Are you there?
What's up?
I lost you. You're frozen. Hold on a second. Let me go like this. Let me bring you back.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we're back. So repeat what you just said, because I lost you for a minute.
Apparently the judge and the clerk could hear it, and the clerk was trying to get people to stop and be quiet, and they wouldn't. They just kept shouting. People were getting very irate, swearing because they're mad about, losing their kids' rights and everything. But here's the thing. I don't even think a lot of those people were real people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why. Because I talked, and I wasn't on the call, but I talked to someone, and I won't mention her name, who's a longtime activist in Connecticut and has been to every single rally we've done, everything. And she said she didn't recognize any of those people who are speaking up and shouting from any rallies or anything. I wouldn't be surprised if they were paid operatives. And I don't have proof of that, but I'm just throwing that out there because it happened in New York too. They're doing it here to try to make our side look bad. I'm not naming names. I don't know who would be behind it, but I have my suspicions, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah. No, because there is that happens, guys. And I immediately thought that when I was hearing that, because the same scenario was happening, and the same discussion also was going on. And one of the lead activists there, Rita, was like, I just got to get off this call. Everybody hang up the call. Get off now. It was just got really nasty. So.
Well, getting back to what you said about etiquette, when the court says they're going into recess, that doesn't always mean that they're coming back, all right? If they're coming back, the judge will usually explain that. We're going to take a recess for lunch. We'll be back in an hour. If the judge doesn't say that and says the court stands at recess, that generally means the hearing's over, okay? And people didn't understand that. They thought recess meant she was going to come back with a decision or something.
Okay.
That does happen on rare occasions, that a decision will be read on the record. In a federal court hearing like this, not usually. Usually that means the court stands at recess and she'll be issuing a decision sometime after. It could be tonight, it could be tomorrow, it could be a week from now. But it doesn't mean that you're getting a decision immediately and she's coming back. And they were all waiting. So my wife told me, said, there's still a lot of people on that call. Maybe you should go in and say something, because people, at least some people, will know who you are. People don't, won't recognize if I speak up. So I went back into the call, and I announced that, the hearing is over. Please, everybody, the decision will be issued shortly. If you could please leave the room. And then all of a sudden the call started dropping down. But that was like 25 minutes later. All this had already happened. This whole explosion had already happened. I didn't hear any of it, because as soon as the hearing was over, Norm Pattis, our attorney, was calling me, because I'm the primary, the lead client in this case, and he was calling me to just see how I felt about it, impressions, to sort of talk shop a little bit after the hearing. So I immediately hung up the Zoom call and took his call. And then immediately after that, I had to call Cameron to follow up on the Second Circuit case. But, it was wild. But then I find out, I hang up with the attorneys, and my wife is like, something bad is going down. Something bad just happened. I was
no.
I said, what now? I need another problem. But, listen, all's well that ends well. I don't even think those were really people on our side, most of them. I think those were people that were incentivized, I'll put it that way, to go in there and cause trouble, to make our side look bad, because the same thing happened in New York.
Yeah.
And it was, and I remember hearing that, and all of a sudden people started screaming and swearing and everything else. And I was like, what is going on? Are you kidding me? Are you really doing this right now? So, and again, if the press picks up on that, they'll run with it. They'll run with it to make us look bad. Yeah, because their number one goal is to make us look like a bunch of whack jobs.
So there could have been, just food for thought out there. And I agree with you that there are definitely people that will be in there to instigate. And if anyone got drawn into that, because what happens is you just can start with somebody and it could just set off a whole train of things. It could just be one provocateur that could set it off or something, and somebody else could go at it. I don't know. There are several, then they feed off of each other or whatever. But just to be aware that the press is there. So and they are awful to us to begin with. So we want to just be aware of that. So, because we're always getting trashed for things like the woman who really had nothing to do with the medical freedom movement. She spit on someone. It was terrible behavior. Nobody condones that. And I hate that they try to conflate the real argument, which is the court case, and not the chatter on the phone with people who are, maybe they're just not aware that it's being recorded. You're being recorded by the
It's being recorded. It's a government Zoom call.
Being recorded by the government.
There's a federal judge listening in on everything you're saying. I mean, do you really want to do that? I know these people aren't lawyers. They don't necessarily understand courtroom decorum. Maybe they don't realize they're still being heard. But the clerk was trying to come on and say, we're still here. The judge can hear you. And finally, she just had to shut it off because she didn't want it to be continued playing in the courtroom. But the Zoom call continued, apparently. So that can't happen again. If there is one instigator, and I think you might be right, Jay, it might just be one person. Maybe these aren't a whole group of paid operatives. Maybe there's just one plant, one troll that's put in there to start this.
Yeah.
If that happens again, don't take the bait. Just quietly leave.
Just get
don't
off the call.
Say anything.
Leave. Just leave the call, because at that point, when the judge is saying recess, they're not, unless they said they were going to do that. But if it gets ugly, just drop the call. It's just, and then that's what ultimately happened in New York. It was a similar thing. People were getting off. There was one leader that was in there that just kept repeating it over and over again. It just, get off the call. Hang up the phone. You get off the call. This is not the time or the place. And I understand people are upset. Believe me, this is one of the worst experiences I've ever seen in my lifetime. And we've been at this battle for quite a while. And I never would have imagined that we would be where we are today, where I'm meeting a woman who is perfectly healthy, who was coerced into something she didn't want. And this is a grown adult now, and it like the children couldn't articulate this as much. And people are upset. There's ugliness here. And I even got I'm just going to put this woman's comment here about her religious exemption. This is Kristen Christine Corda, and she was saying how she had a religious exemption on file since 2019. The college said I had to fill out another. No answer as to why I had to refile something they accepted a year and a half ago. So that's kind of, they're just doing things, like to torture people. So the tensions are high, and I'm kind of moving into even this, so they're doing all these weird shenanigans with people, like intimidation or making them refile. You wouldn't have to refile if you're at the same college, if it was already there, correct? I mean, I don't know. There could be more to that question.
You're not supposed to have to. Students who already had one on file were supposed to be grandfathered per this law. That's all right. So people who already had it are supposed to be grandfathered, just like the kids who already had it in K through 12. But it doesn't mean that every school is honoring that.
Yeah. I lost you again, Brian, for a second.
I'm sorry. Do you hear me again?
Yep, I got you.
Yeah, so they're supposed to be grandfathered, but doesn't mean that every school is honoring that, unfortunately. So, listen, we're going to fight for everyone. We think this is absolutely unconstitutional. We know this is unconstitutional, and that's what we're trying to prove in the court of law. Like I said, we committed to this from day one. We said that if this religious exemption was repealed, we would file a federal lawsuit, and we've done that. So we will keep you updated. Please stay tuned. Trust me, as soon as the decision is released, it'll be plastered everywhere. I'll send it out on email. I'll put it on social media. Everybody can share it. And then we'll go from there. And if we have to appeal or if they have to appeal, either way, we'll end up at another hearing at the Second Circuit most likely. But, sooner rather than later, I think.
Wow. So a lot of good news actually today. I think I'm hopeful. It's really fascinating. The angle that Norm took. He's a very talented attorney, as is Cash. They're both very talented. So I'm hopeful because, guys, it's up to us. So these are attorneys who are citizens like you and I are. And so there's, this law, I have to believe that law is going to help us out here because that's the whole, I want to have that hope there, and no matter what, keep up the fight, and people can donate. So I think it's great what We the Patriots is doing. And I applaud all the work that you're doing, Brian. Thank you for taking the time out of your crazy day to talk to me.
Anytime.
All right, so we'll let it go with that, and we'll reconnect again after the decision. As you can see, chaos is starting to erupt at my house right now with dogs and kids and everything else. So, all right.
Mine
Thank
too.
You, Brian.
Mine too. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Okay,
yep,
bye-bye.